Good morning to one and all. My name is Owsley Brown, and I'm this year's chairman of the Festival of Faiths, and I want to welcome everybody to this morning's session with Gerardo Abboud. This sadly will be our final session with Gerardo, who heads back shortly after this afternoon's session to Argentina. But I just wanted to start by expressing my great thanks to you, Gerardo, for these marvelous days that you've given us, and tell you how much we all appreciate your great insights and marvelous and very encouraging counsel and guidance on the meditation practice path. So thank you very, very much. Many of you have been here, but for those of you who haven't, Gerardo Abboud is one of the foremost members of the first generation of Westerners to actively engage with the Tibetan Buddhist path and practice. In the early 1970s, he moved to northern India, where he immediately took up residence with the Tibetan Buddhist community, where he stayed for 14 years, and then returned to his native Argentina to begin setting up a practice center there, and would go on to become the South American translator for the Dalai Lama. He's also the author or translator of a forthcoming book that will be coming out in January by way of Shambhala Publications, which is a very sort of interesting Kentucky connection. It's a practice manual for meditation practice that was written a long time ago by the third incarnation of Kamtrul Rinpoche. The eighth incarnation of Kamtrul Rinpoche was someone that Thomas Merton met, took pictures of, and has accounts of his meetings of in the Asian journals. This same eighth Kamtrul Rinpoche was someone that Gerardo also knew and studied with in northern India. So I think that's enough of an introduction, and I just want to welcome you back to the stage, Gerardo, and thank you so much.
So, good morning, and we have a long session today, longer than usual. Usually it's only 1 hour. And we've been having mainly talking about meditation and how to deal with our minds, how to deal with our thoughts and emotions. But I thought that today, since we have a little bit more time, you might be interested to know also a little bit of what the Buddhist approach to the nature or the knowledge of the nature of reality, the nature of ourselves, is about, because all the meditations that we do in Buddhism have that final objective, that to come to a direct experience, direct realization of what we truly are. And so it's, I think it goes along also with the main theme of these meetings of guided meditation, so I'd like to speak a little bit about that. There is something that we usually ignore in our lives, but we cannot really continue to ignore for a long time if we are really interested in finding some kind of harmony and also finding a sense of well-being within ourselves. And it is the fact that we actually do not really know who we are. We seldom ask ourselves that. It doesn't seem to be part of the picture. part of our daily worries. I doubt anybody of us, when we wake up in the morning, take a shower, and have many things to do during the day, that we start by thinking, who am I? What is this? What is the world? It's something that maybe we have asked ourselves at some point, but then the profundity and the difficulty of the subject is so heavy that we kind of put it aside somehow, and we rely on some information that we're given by philosophies, religions, and spiritual traditions, and so forth, science. And we take that as if it were something that we really know, but we actually, if we are quite critical with ourselves in that way, then we see that we don't really know it. Maybe we receive an information from Christianity. They say that we are the Son of God and God created us and God is a Trinity. Then we say, okay, that's what I am. I'm a human being, but I've been like in the image of God, and I'm created by God. I'm the Son of God, and so forth. Or maybe we get another information through the Islam, and then they say it's not a Trinity, God is one, and you are also like created by God, so then we just stay with that. Then Buddha comes and he says, actually, you are a perfect being, your nature is Buddhahood, you are totally perfect in your essence, and giving us other types of explanations. And we take that as, okay, well, they say so, so it must be like that. But truly, we do not know. And that thing that actually is present in many of us is not something that in Buddhism is taken lightly. It's kind of considered to be the root of all our problems. Because on top of not knowing what we really are, which is something that is not really conscious. I mean, we don't know what we are. It happens unconsciously. It happens that then we need to assume some kind of existence, because otherwise, what would we be? We are something. So another aspect of ignorance comes, which is the misconception on what we think we are. So basically, we don't know what we are. Because of that, then we assume we are a solid, intrinsic being, separate from the surroundings, which we also see as composed by intrinsic entities. The world is there, that is the other, that is the object. I am here, I am the subject, the one who perceives and relates to that world. We have hardly any connection. The world is solid, exists in a concrete form, and I myself also exist in a solid and intrinsic way. Independent existence. I do not depend in my existence on anything else. At least my soul, what I call my I or whatever, we feel as if we were totally independent entities. What Buddha discovered, actually, when he was a prince and abandoned the palace, worried about the marks of our existence, the marks of old age and sickness and death and birth and all this cycle of life that we always have, when he was looking actually, how can we be so conditioned? Which is something that we always don't really look to, and we're giving it so much importance, but we're actually very conditioned people, very conditioned beings. We're born without knowing why. We get sick, we age, and we die. And none of these things is something that we want or we decide. They happen, they control us, and it's a part of the package of human beings. It's normal that as a human, I will have to endure all these different aspects, even though we don't like them. And also, then, as a human, there will also be all kinds of mental sufferings that I will have to endure. There will be many types of emotions. I will have attachment to things. I will also have aggression. I will have anger. Sometimes I'll have a lot of grudge and jealousy, pride, and all these things. Of course, they are not good, but what can I do? These are the human package. Buddha also had these things, but when he was a prince, Siddhartha, but he didn't overlook these. He didn't say, well, it's too difficult, let's have fun, let's live the life the best way possible. He had all the conditions to do that. He was a prince in a palace and so forth. But that is something that when he was not satisfied with that, and he said, no, there must be some more profound meaning to my existence. Then he left and he started to find what the reason of his existence, why he was alive, what was the world that he was perceiving. Was it created by someone? Was it created by himself? Why did he have to endure and accommodate with so many conditionings? And because of that, and because he did not budge and he continued all the way in his investigation, then he found that actually there is a basic fault that we have. Like it is something that affects our perception, affects our knowledge, the way we experience ourselves, the way we experience the world. And that is constant in all beings, that we have a consciousness, and therefore we feel, we are able to cognize, we're able to know, and we have that type of consciousness that can feel and can also know, and within that consciousness always there is, like it's within our DNA almost to say that there is this fault in which we don't perceive properly. We perceive in a mistaken way our existence and also the existence of the world that we relate to. And what type of mistake is that? That is a mistake which has to do very much with, we can see that in a way of when we start to learn that actually the nature of reality is not so solid as we see it, then we start to see how we are so rooted in a way of perceiving reality which does not really match the way that is presented by those who have transcended, those who have seen what is the nature of our being. Buddha, through his investigations, then, he found that eventually he came to discover the true nature of the self, the true nature of the being, and he found out that all sentient beings, all beings that have this type of consciousness, essentially we are perfect beings. It is this enlightened state, perfect state, with all the sublime qualities of compassion and also wisdom and love and so forth in its perfect state. That is what we really are. If we look for our essence, then that is what we will find. That essence, that Buddha nature, actually, we call it Buddha nature in Buddhism, but because we are Buddhists. And it's not also literally like the nature of Buddha, the teacher, but Buddha means the awakened man, the awakened one, is that which is totally pure of anything that could contaminate it, and also that which is totally full with all the sublime qualities. So it's not like an empty state, it's a state which is full in all sublime qualities. It's a state, basically a state of lucidity, a state of wisdom, of a type of wisdom which is a transcendent type of wisdom, which is omniscience. There are many ways in which it is described, but Buddha was the first one to say that this is not something that belongs to Buddhists. This is something that is the true and absolute nature of reality. Whether I come as a Buddha to show it, whether I do not come, whether many Buddhas come and intend to show it to other beings, or nobody comes, the nature of reality is always the same. It escapes any kind of ism, any kind of property. It is just the nature of everybody, the nature of the whole universe, the nature of ourselves. Now, this nature, that is the main aim that a Buddhist has. Because knowing this nature is knowing the state of truth. A problem now is that when we ignore this nature and we live as a human being and totally circumscribe to this human existence, which is what we normally do, then of course we are human beings now. That is, conventionally we can say that we're a human being. But the whole aim of Buddhism is, first of all, to tell us that this is not the only level of reality. For us, mostly, this is the only level of reality. We don't go beyond the way we perceive and the way we interact with the world. Buddha says that this world is true. It has like some kind of truth, is a conventional truth. But then there's also a different level of reality that is totally indivisible with this one. But it is that present moment, we cannot really perceive it. And that second level of reality is the level of absolute truth. And the whole aim is to find this absolute truth. Because otherwise we're totally dealing with conventional kind of entities and conventional types of things that we think exist and that we think are real. There wouldn't be any problem if that were the only reality. But there is a problem when we know that there is something much more profound, much more present within us that we can discover. It is not something that will be discovered after death. It was not something that it is inaccessible now. If we do good and we behave on something, then when we die, then we will be rewarded in a way. It's not that. That's not the way that it's presented. It is right now, right this present moment, it is within us. And that is something that we can say is the only constant thing that we have, that Buddha nature. Sometimes we have changed from the morning till now as a human being. Sometimes we are human. We are now human, right? But how long we will live, how long we will continue to be a human. Of course, we know that that is limited. So we can say, now, temporarily, I am a human. But you cannot say, I am temporarily a Buddha. We are Buddhas. That is our basic nature. That is our true nature. That's the absolute nature. That is why it doesn't have a beginning. It doesn't have an end. It cannot really be described in any way. Conceptually, it's beyond any kind of description. It's beyond any kind of word, beyond any thought. But what is very rich is that it is within us. So, if it is within us at each moment, each fraction of a moment, then there is a possibility to tap on it, to have a glimpse of it, to experience it. And in fact, it is said that of the many states of mind that we have during the day, then this true nature, this basic nature, which is no other than the nature of mind, the mind in its own natural state, before it becomes distorted through ignorance and through other types of aspects, that nature of mind is totally identical to that nature of Buddha or that nature of enlightenment. So it is quite possible that during the day, just as we have one state of mind and another state of mind, then there is a gap and this true nature just shows. And if we have the right instructions, then we could be able to recognize that state. We could have like a window to see that state, to experience it. And some practices of Buddhism, the most direct practices, are aimed at that. And meditation within, if that is the scope, then meditation is an extremely important aspect, extremely important tool. Now, when we say that we don't perceive correctly, we have to explain a little bit like what does it mean? I mean, Buddha comes and says, you don't perceive correctly, you're wrong, I'm right, but you're wrong, it doesn't sound so good. But then we have to know what he says, what he means by that misperception of reality that we have. The problem is that we always live reifying our existence in every possible way. To reify something is to give some reality to something that intrinsically does not have that type of reality. Something that is real, something that is unreal, then we perceive it as real. So that means to say we are reifying that. For instance, when we are dreaming, by all accounts, the dream is something that is unreal. Nothing is happening. We are just lying down in a room in the dark, and maybe we're dreaming that we are in the Bahamas, having fun in the beach. But that is not really happening. By all accounts, that is not real. Yet, in the dream, we may have a nightmare, or we may have a fantastic news and we feel very happy, or we also feel very scared because someone is chasing us or whatever. So that means to say that if we are having this fear within the dream, we are not taking the dream as something like a movie or something that has no reality. We're taking it as real. So we are reifying the dream. So we wake up from the dream and we say, well, fine, now that was a dream. Luckily, no one was chasing me. But now this is reality. I can go, I can make a cup of coffee, and I can do a business, and today I made like $50,000, and everything is real. I am real, the other person is real, the business is real. We're reifying reality. What Buddha comes, he says that is a misperception of reality. Because if we really investigate the nature of reality through philosophy, and what's most important, in a contemplative way, through direct experience, we will find no entity which has an intrinsic and independent reality. And of course, this is something that it is said as a final outcome of analysis, but Buddha himself is the first one to say it doesn't help that I say so and that you take it for granted because Buddha said it. You have to investigate on your own. You have to question all my teaching. You cannot take whatever I say just for face value. Everything has to be investigated, because only when investigated by oneself, we come to a conviction and we leave no room of a doubt at all. And then when we are absolutely convinced, then that means to say that it becomes our own truth. And when we go beyond the mere intellectual conviction, and through contemplative practice we have the direct experience, then we are no different to Buddha. And we don't need a Buddha to tell us how it is, because we are like Buddha. We have found the same truth as Buddha has found. Now, going back to this misperception, of course, it's quite easy to understand that we do not coincide 100% on our perceptions of things. We may see the same thing, and since we all have this present existence as a human being, then we will all coincide. We have in Tibetan, in Buddhism, we call it like our perception is quite conditioned to our karma, which is the result of what we have done in the past. Since our karma has conditioned us in a way that we are humans, then we will perceive as humans. And a dog will perceive as a dog because, well, they have a karma of a dog. And the perception of a dog doesn't coincide with the perception of humans. But humans also have different types of perception. It's quite clear that that can happen. If we see a flower, for instance, an orchid, and then someone might see the orchid and might love the orchid in all its way, and like the color and the shape of the leaves and the shape of the petals. And when he sees the flower, then he's really moved because he loves the beauty of the flower. It only kind of induces a sense of pleasure, a sense of happiness. But maybe there is somebody else who, seeing that orchid, then immediately becomes depressed because he remembers that he very happily brought an orchid to his beloved girlfriend and said, "Oh, look what I bought for you. I bought this orchid." And the girlfriend said, "Oh, you're so sweet. You know how much I love orchids. Thank you so much. But, I wanted to tell you, we have to talk, And so then, like every time he sees an orchid, then the guy becomes depressed because the orchid brings back, all the memories of separation and so forth. Actually, poor orchid, it's just an orchid, but it doesn't have, it's no intention in the orchid to make someone happy or someone sad, but we lay on that orchid all kinds of feelings, emotions, and maybe we have traumas, we have kind of wounds within us that make us respond to the perception of the orchid in different ways. So that is kind of different ways of perceiving. But when Buddha says that we don't perceive correctly things that surround us, and what's most important, we don't perceive our own existence in a correct way, he doesn't really mean that. He doesn't go to that different kinds of perception. Like the orchid also, for a bee, is just food. It doesn't perceive it as beautiful or anything. It's just food. So one thing is perceived in so many different ways. But there is one thing that we do not have absolutely any difference in the way we perceive, in all of us. Whenever we perceive something, we perceive it as real. Because we have that fixation to reify. So anything that appears in the field of perception, including thoughts and emotions, then automatically our cognizance perceives and fixates on it as something real. That is kind of like a basic something, I don't know how to say it, but it's almost like in our DNA that we will reify. The moment we are a small baby and we're within the womb and then we are born, maybe we don't have thoughts, we don't have concepts yet. Our minds are totally blank. We have no information. We have not yet received many kinds of inputs. But the moment that child takes contact with something that touches or whatever, immediately that child will perceive it as separate in a totally unconscious way, and as something that, of course, is real and is separate to him or to her. Because when we reify, that means to say that we perceive ourselves as real, and also, if I am real, if I exist, if I am solid, then the world, the other, the subject, is also solid. So this duality of subject and object is sustained by the reifying fixation. And that reifying fixation is actually the manifestation of ignorance. That's what Buddha says ignorance is. Of course, when we talk about ignorance, it could be some very abstract kind of term. What is ignorance and what is it that we ignore and so forth. But ignorance manifests within us at every single moment. And the way it manifests is with this kind of the tool is reifying. You reify, we reify, the bee reifys, a dog reifys, every being reifys. Every being takes the world that surrounds them and themselves as something real. So it's quite different to our regular perception. I mean, we don't perceive that way. We are all the time dealing with things as that they do exist. I mean, suffering exists. So therefore, I really take suffering so seriously because it exists. And I also exist as the sufferer. So therefore, suffering exists, death exists, my partner leaving me exists, winning the lotto exists. You know, there's so many things, we take them as they truly exist in a concrete way. They have not really much to do with us or with our perception. Now, living in a way in which then our existence does not represent and is not really steadily or stably functioning within truth, then because we cannot claim that we have the truth, we do not really know who we are, we may lean ourselves with what other religions say, but that is only information we get. We cannot truly and honestly say, I know what I am. That type of ignorance then turns into this misconception, but the misconception then is active in the way of reification. Then reification is a problem. The problem is that because we live on an assumption, an unconscious assumption, it's not that we are all the time telling ourselves, I am this or I am that, it's just a basic assumption that I have an existence, I've reified myself. Then, because it's not really an aspect of truth, it is quite vulnerable. It is based on something that we are not truly sure whether it is that way or this way. The mind is intelligent in itself, so it can never ignore so profoundly that basically it has built up this whole kind of system of person, or with feelings, with perceptions, with emotions, and so forth, on the basis of truth. It's on the basis of an assumption. So therefore it has to be propped with different things. If you are functioning in truth, the truth is indestructible. You don't need to prop it in any way. But we don't do that. We live with this assumption, so therefore, when we experience some situation that is threatening, we have rejection, we have aggression, we try to defend our territory. And on the other hand, when we have a situation that can bolster our territory of ego, then we try to seduce it. Then we have desire and attachment and all the other types of afflictions or emotions that function. So this triad of basic ignorance, which is reification, I, my ego, myself, I have a self that exists, and as a reaction to that then aggression and also attachment. This is what's called the three poisons. And of course, because of that, then we are kind of all the time involved with hope, with fear, with anxiety, with expectations, and so forth. It's very difficult to get over all these because we're always functioning with this triad that sustains our existence. The whole point of Buddhism, these emotions that I mentioned, the basic affliction is a cognitive problem, because ignorance is not an emotion, it is a cognitive problem. But all the rest are more like emotions. Attachment is emotion, and then jealousy, pride, envy, and so forth, and anger and rancor, and so forth. They're all emotions, and they build up to 100, they build up to thousands of them. And the whole point of Buddhism is to eradicate all these afflictions. But why can we eradicate them? Why can't we eliminate them? We can eliminate them because they are invalid cognitions. They are not really things that you can prove them to be and to have truth in them. One of the characteristics of a valid cognition, a valid perception, is that the more you investigate it, the more or the stronger it becomes in the conviction. Whereas an invalid cognition, then the more you investigate it, the more it vanishes, the more it kind of splits and dismantles itself. And that's what happens with all these afflictions. So Buddhism has somehow, when Buddha started to teach and he taught about the Four Noble Truths and that everything is suffering and so forth, it seems to be quite bleak. But actually the other side of the teaching is very good news, because he's saying that it is possible to find permanent and everlasting well-being. We are not going to find it as long as we remain within this structure, this false structure based on ignorance, because something is basically wrong, something is basically a lie. It's kind of fallacious. Somehow it does not stand by itself. We need all the time to keep it up. But we are able to find it if we cut the root of this whole structure that is kind of invalid, and it's not really able to sustain itself because it is an invalid cognition. So that is good news. It means to say that, okay, we may have this existence, which we by now, I think after so many years of life, we are not able to say that we've been so successful in the search of happiness. That is something that we all want. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to avoid suffering. Ourselves, animals, everybody. It's kind of like something that is totally organic within our constitution. And we devote every single act, thought, and word in our lives. Ultimately, they're geared to find that type of well-being, that type of happiness. But there's a sense of dissatisfaction that sometimes happens, and we develop some ability to overcome it with kind of immediate things. But the sense of dissatisfaction is basic. It's very difficult to get rid of completely. To some, that sense of dissatisfaction with life and with the things of life, and especially when it happens not because of lack of things, but within abundance of things surrounding oneself, and still one is dissatisfied, then that is something that in the Western culture is considered to be a problem. You have everything. Why do you feel so bad? You have a nice wife, you have kids, you have a good position, and your work is really good, and you earn a lot of money, you have 3 cars, 5 houses, whatever. I mean, you should be happy. I mean, why are you dissatisfied? So there's a problem there. That is considered to be a problem. Dissatisfaction is considered to be kind of like an ailment, some kind of pathology. So then they go to psychoanalysts, or they go first to a physician. Physician doesn't find anything, so they go to a psychoanalyst. Maybe the psychoanalyst doesn't find much. They would keep them anyhow for 1-2 years, but maybe they haven't found immediately something, and they keep on trying to find. But it is kind of a problem. And for Buddhists, and in Buddhism, if you have that dissatisfaction, you have to feel very rich. You have found like the beginning of something that will lead you to total freedom. If you don't have dissatisfaction, you will never get involved with this spiritual path. It's something that demands so much from you. It demands renunciation, it demands so many things and so much dedication to that path. And the motor that really drives you along the path is a sense of dissatisfaction. And so therefore dissatisfaction is good news in Buddhism, because it is by acknowledging the first noble truth that suffering and our life is marked with suffering. Dissatisfaction is a manifestation of suffering. It's because you have acknowledged that you are aspiring to something more profound, something that is more transcendent, and something that may lead to a total liberation and the final enlightenment. So therefore, when we talk about meditation, which is the main subject of our talk, why do Buddhists meditate? The teachings of Buddhism can be classified in 2 groups. There's a huge group of teachings and practices which are aimed at kind of improving the quality of our life, in the sense of making ourselves kind of a healthy human being. If we start like being very neurotic and confused and with a lot of problems and a lot of speed and so forth, and never really quite happy with ourselves, or we have low self-esteem, or we have so many different aspects that can affect us, then there are many practices that will bring that person to a state in which he's quite stable, quite normal, and then improve the quality of life. And of course, then he will be much more calm, happy, he will be much more loving, much more open, and relate much better with the rest of the people. But still doesn't mean that that person has completely freed himself from the bondage of conditioning. The other group of teachings of Buddhism, and that's where the real richness of Buddhism lies, is all the teachings and practices that aim at total liberation as a first step, and final, complete discovery of our Buddha nature and being completely an enlightened being. An enlightened being that, of course, is a mixture, a complete integration of wisdom and compassion, and which is always set completely to helping other beings find that type of level of fulfillment. So, in general, like some of the practices that we do at the very beginning, they will result in improving our quality of life. We will be much more calm, much more beings that will relate with everybody in a much better way, and also we will be much better with ourselves. There is a question usually, like when people talk about Buddhism as being the doctrine of non-self, then people think that the Buddha said, well, there is no self at all. which is not right. There is a type of self, a type of I or ego, which is questioned in Buddhism, which is the reified I. Is that I that feels solid? Is that sense that, okay, we have all the components of my person, like my form, my body, then there's my feelings, my sensations, and also like I have some impulses or formations, and also my consciousness. All together, that's what makes me Gerardo in my case. And so these components, then they're not taken to be as complete part of myself, but it's like the basis of an I which seems to be separate. It's now in this body, then it will continue after life. When the body is destroyed, it's something permanent, it's something singular, it's something that is independent of any other factor. And although we do not phrase it in that way, and we never think of us in that way, that is the way that we usually operate. That is what is called the reified I, because we assign reality to an I which does not have these kind of characteristics. In Buddhism, we talk about reality and also what is unreal. And what is real, then, we have to redefine so many terms when we talk about Buddhism, because so many terms are coming from our cultures. We have to redefine what wisdom is, what mind is, what real is also, because otherwise it's like be real, man. I like real. We use it in so many ways. But in Buddhism, then one approach in which we start to see that things cannot be real is that for something to be real, it has to be just like a unity. It has to be singular. That means to say it cannot be formed of different parts. Because if it's formed by different parts, then there is no entity within it. If you take all the parts apart, then nothing will remain. So only when all the parts are totally together, depending on all these parts together, then it seems to be a thing. But then, if something is real, it cannot be something that seems to be. It is, because it's real. So, it cannot be singular. It cannot be also something that is real, should be permanent also. It cannot change. Because if it changes from one instant to the other, then what kind of entity are we talking about? But actually, when we observe reality, we see that everything changes, instant to instant. It changes, the seasons change, we change. When we see a picture of ourselves 5 years ago, we want to hide it because we change so much. But we do change, we age, and we age day by day. We don't notice a daily change. We notice maybe every other year. But then, of course, if we change 1 year, we change also a month, we change in an hour. We change every single instant, because otherwise change could not happen. Change is not a discrete kind of phenomenon that jumps like that. It goes instant to instant, there is a change. So therefore, since everything changes, and that is an observable thing, then when we say that something is permanent, it cannot be permanent, because from the moment A until the moment Z, it already changed, but it also changed from A to B, B to C, and so forth. So an entity cannot change, because we are talking about one thing at moment N, A, and something changed within it, that length of time. So it ended up being another thing, moment C or moment D. So nothing is permanent. And then thirdly, nothing is independent, because things all arise from causes and conditions, and therefore they depend on something for them to arise. So based on this analysis, which is a very kind of light analysis, of course, I mean, people study 3 years, 10 years, 15 years debating about the nature of reality. I just wanted to have a glimpse, to give you a glimpse of how we approach things in a different way than we usually approach them. And then we come to a kind of conclusion that things are not real according to, what the definition of reality is. But still they exist, and still they manifest. So therefore, they manifest. What kind of reality do they have? So the reality that everything has is not more real than a dream or an illusion or a mirage. There are many analogies for describing this type of reality. Things are like an illusion. Things are like a dream. But we don't perceive things as a dream. We perceive things as real and true. And that is a manifestation of ignorance. In few words, that's what in Buddhism is described as our constant way of dealing with our reality. The problem is that when we perceive things as real in that way, then we act as real, our thoughts perceive as real, our words also become real. Anything that we do creates karma because it's within that structure of ignorance, and therefore each thing that we do, each thought that we have, each word that we say, each action that we do with our body reinforces the whole system of perpetuation of in the next instant then we will perceive again in a reified way. So we've been doing this since time without beginning according to Buddhism. And actually when we talk about destroying ignorance, what we have to destroy is that type of cognizance. Not the cognizance itself, but a cognizance that is now has this virus of reification, and therefore, because of that, is distorted. We are not saying we destroy the cognizance. We destroy, the whole aim of the practice is to take away or create the conditions for this grip of reification, the grip of concept, which is a manifestation of reification, the grip of concept to fall. And when that falls, what remains is the pure, pristine lucidity of our true basic nature of mind, which is also of the same nature of Buddha nature. That is why a meditation is so important. We cannot do that, through ordinary talk. We cannot manage that type of approach through study alone, because study is always within concept. And concept is reification. When we reify, when we have concepts in our mind, concept, the definition of concept in the Buddhist term, is also something that happens in a structure of subject and object. That means to say in an ignorant structure of our perception. We have to make a difference between thought and concept. Because in our Western culture, then, thought and concept is about the same. We cannot have a concept without a thought. We have a concept, and thought and concept are the same thing. But in terms of the Buddhist approach, thought and concept are two different things. They can work together, and most of the time they work together, but they are not exactly the same thing. Because our minds, as a concept is defined as that mental event that is occurring in that structure of subject and object as two independent entities. That is the way we always perceive. So it might happen, and it does happen in meditation, that sometimes you have absolutely no thought. Then, unless we make this clarification, then you would say, oh, then the mind is, at that point, is non-conceptual, because it has no thought. But a thought-free cognizance, it doesn't mean that it is a concept-free cognizance. It just means that at that moment there are no thoughts. But still, that experience at that very moment can be that there is a meditator meditating on now, for instance, on nowness, and there is a meditation through which that mind is settled in that moment of now. So still it is happening within the dualism of subject and object. So concept is very much ingrained in our consciousness, is completely accompanying, modeling, totally like permeating, is I don't know how to say, any thought that we have, any perception that we have already comes along with a concept. It doesn't need to be a concept with a word or something, but it is conceptual. As long as it happens within subject and object, it is conceptual. As long as that cognizance is conceptual, it's not able to see its own natural state. So then we have a problem there. We are trying to find our natural state of being, but we are functioning all the time with this conceptual mind. So if we study, that is one way. what we do with study, what we study through studies. Study is always important, even in Buddhism. In any kind of approaches, study is important. There is a difference in how much we devote to study. Study is always within thought, and the more we study, then we can come closer and closer to a good representation of what reality is. But study, anyhow, we are still within that structure of thought, of concept. We are not really able to transcend the conceptual structure. So therefore, we need a new tool, something new that does not entail discursive thought, does not entail discursive study and learning or kind of thought process, and is able then to teach the mind, to teach cognizance, to slowly be free from the grip of concept by itself and eventually enter into its own natural state. The contemplative traditions of Buddhism, they stress this second aspect. They do not at all overlook the importance of study. I don't mean now that study is useless. Study is very, very helpful. But then what's most important is to really, after one is convinced with study, then to completely apply oneself to finding the nature of mind. Because nature of mind is the nature of our existence, the nature of our basic absolute being, the essence of reality. So therefore, that is the main purpose of the Buddhist meditation. But in order to do that, in general, then we have to bring ourselves who are, constantly living in all kinds of distractions and a lot of noise in our minds, unable to keep attention even for more than a few seconds. That mind is totally unworkable. I mean, that mind cannot really have the sufficient calmness to entertain the sharp cognizance that is needed in order for the mind to discover its own nature. So the first step that we have to do is to calm the mind. And that is all the teachings that calm the mind, that are aimed to finding some space within us of peace, of calm, in which then thoughts, although thoughts may appear, they are not able to distract us so much. Then to find that is practices that belong mostly to the first group that I mentioned, which is a group in which we become a healthier human being, less neurotic, much more calm. In fact, actually, what we are right now is a result of habit. We perceive because of habit, because of habitual patterns that we have created in the past, in the long past, and that influenced us, and learned patterns that we have since we were born. And then we are always kind of conditioned by these patterns, in which then we have habits that repeat themselves, and every time we act in a way according to these habits, we perpetuate the system of habits. So we have all these habits that push us towards distraction, habits to push us towards reinforcing our I, our territory, habits that push us to react always in terms of subject and object in a separate or independent way. All these are habits that condition our perception, condition our emotions, condition our feeling. And so then many of the practices of Buddhism and the meditations of Buddhism is to generate new habits, to counteract these habits. New habits that are much more in tune with our basic nature. They don't collide with our basic nature, like anger, for instance, or hatred, or like strong attachment or strong avarice. These collide very much with our basic nature. But habits of, we can develop love, we can develop compassion. We can bring the seed of compassion that we have as a part of a human being to unlimited levels through a system of practice. A system of practice that is based on concept, it is based on habit, but is creating new habits that will counteract and will eliminate the bad habits that we had before. And so in fact, actually, like we talk about habits, we feel that, of course, we are something quite solid. But unfortunately, if we try to find behind these habits some solid entity, some solid being, then that is what is most difficult to find. That is what we call the ego or the I, and that is not so easy to find. We will not find that I, which is a solid being behind all these habits. But Buddha does not say that there is no I. There is no ego. We have a mere I. We don't have a solid I. That's the problem. That's what is. No Buddhist school will accept the existence of that solid I. But still we have an I that functions, an I that works, an I that thinks, an I that also engages in a practice towards final liberation and final elimination of that solid I. That is also an I. But it is called like a mere I, because it's just a name, a designation that we put on all the constituents of my being, like my body, my sensations, and so forth. So we come to realize that, of course, there is an I. There is a sense of individuality in all of us. It's a mere sense of individuality, but of course it is there. High Lamas who have totally realized that solid I does not exist, then they're all the time in the continuity of their true nature, where that solid I never appears. But still they have the notion of a mere I. If they are called by the name, they will turn. And if they plan to make a monastery, they will say, I want to make a monastery. They will not say, a Lama wants making monastery, because he doesn't want to use the word I. It's just normal. Because there is an I, but there is a different attachment, or there is no attachment to that I, because it's just a mere denomination. It is a fully understood to be like a mere label that one is having, and it is a mere sense of individuality. In our relative way, we do need it. Not only that is a mere level of existence of the I, and that is accepted, acknowledged by Buddhism, no problem. That is there. We have a mere I, perfect. But then also there is a mere table. Not a solid, real table. There's a mere carpet, mere audience, mere festival of faith. Everything, the whole of reality, is appearances devoid of any kind of intrinsic nature. That is the way then that when we know absolute truth, then we start to see that things operate in that way. So now let's talk about meditation, because I don't know how. Maybe people do not want to aim at such a level of realization and liberation, but they want to calm their minds. So meditation has also that purpose. So we've been practicing meditations that are aimed of finding this mind, calm mind. And then we have to deal with thoughts. And we talked about thoughts yesterday and the day before. Thoughts actually are like a natural expression of our minds. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. They happen. Just like fire heats and water wets, mind thinks. That's the nature of things. Problem is that we never know that we're thinking. We never know what we're thinking, because that is distraction. We are distracted. And the thoughts then, in general, the problem of thoughts is that we are always thinking. And as long as we're thinking, then thinking is like a screen that separates us from that huge inner space of our basic nature. We're always kind of dancing within thoughts, repeating stories, because that's what distraction does. We may have new things that we think about, but there's so many things. We're thinking all the time. So all the time we're repeating stories that happen. It's useless, so many useless things that we're using the mind for. I mean, it is automatic. We are addicted to distraction, unfortunately. It is our addiction. Our mind is totally distracted all the time. So it goes from A to B to C, then again to A, then maybe C, then B. But we don't have a... We also kind of be driven by new thoughts, but if you really analyze it, we repeat a lot. It's kind of an entertainment which has a very low quality. But it is part of us. We keep on chewing on it because it gives us company somehow. I mean, it's difficult to stay without just resting in this noiseless, calm mind without anything to do. Doesn't seem to be very appealing. But actually, we might find much more satisfaction if we found that than again settling in all these kind of used thoughts and different videos that we have in our minds. So the main point at the beginning is that Distraction is actually, has absolutely no benefit. Even in a worldly sense, distraction is no good. I mean, and unfortunately, in schools, I think, except now that there are many programs that are being started in order to introduce mindfulness and introduce attention and many different qualities at educational level. In general, we were told, at least when I was studying, that you have to concentrate. It's good to have concentration because it's more effective. But it's not that it's really such a big deal. It's not such a big problem. And distraction is not something that will have some harmful effects on you or on your well-being or whatever. It's just not so good because you spend much more time. If you were concentrated, you would do something much quicker. So the distraction is really kind of a big problem if you are in a spiritual path. And also, if you want to find a state of well-being, distraction is a problem. Because when one is distracted, then emotions will come because of these habits. And then one emotion might come in the morning, and you woke up very happy, but then one thought of something ugly that happened 5 weeks ago, maybe, comes to mind. And immediately that makes you feel bad or kind of irritated or whatever for maybe 3 hours, because of that thought was not liberated. It just was a thought. Because of distraction, you didn't notice, and you just went along with the thought. And that thought left a lot of imprints in you, which affect your also sense or your well-being at that point. So even if one wants to find peace, everybody wants to find peace. Peace is another word to well-being. Then we have to be able to disengage from the train of thoughts. It does not mean that we have to suppress thoughts. Does not mean that we have to eliminate thoughts, but we have the freedom to be free from the thought. That's all right. Thoughts don't need to be so dominating anymore. I mean, they always dominate us. They are dominated during the whole day. We're thinking, and when we go to bed after a few instants of deep sleep, again we start to dream. So again we are thinking. Mind never stops. It's kind of working all the time. And we don't even notice because it's all the time like that. And the fact is that's because they have this magnetic power to attract our attention. So we have to work on that, reducing that magnetic power that thoughts have, which make them addictive, which makes distraction addictive. And that is the purpose of the first type of meditation, which is a meditation in which we calm the mind. We have to find and train the mind to be able to rest in the present moment. Rest in the present moment is because our final aim is to find reality. And definitely reality, we cannot find it in the past or in the future. And even it's questionable if there is such a thing as a present moment. But anyhow, it makes more sense that it would be in the present moment. So therefore, first we bring the mind to just rest in nowness. That's this moment of now, which is one concept still, because now is just a concept. Past is a concept, future is a concept, time is a concept also. But we live within conceptual mind, so it's okay. Instead of having 1,000 concepts, with the train of distraction, then we kind of reduce all that level of distraction, and abundance of concepts is one, which is nowness. If we do that, then the mind becomes very calm. And within that calmness, also an important aspect that we have to keep is that there should be lucidity, clarity. Not only calm, but also clear. These two aspects also have to be present in Buddhist meditation. If we are not clear, then the mind may be without thoughts, but we are like kind of in a totally oblivious state. It doesn't help at all. Every single night, we have passed through a time in which we had no dreams, and that deep sleep hasn't helped us very much. And we never used it as meditation. So that is no good. It has to be clear. Clarity is most important in practice of meditation. Of course, calmness is important, but clarity is important because within clarity we will find Buddhahood. Clarity is an expression of our Buddha nature. coming in all distorted ways right now, but it is that cognizance of clarity that will now start to become refined more and more and purify itself more and more through the practice of meditation, become much more subtle and much more free of the grip of concept. And at some point, clarity itself will release itself from concept and then start to function as the free being that we are, the nature of our being, this nature of enlightenment. So clarity is extremely important. Because of that, in Buddhist meditations, we don't block the senses. Our eyes keep open. Of course, the ears are open. And also, not only open as the organ of the sense, but our cognizance is also open to perceiving anything that happens. They're not considered to be obstacles. If a sound happens, then we just know the sound. If someone coughs, then we know, oh, cough, that's all. But we don't get involved with cough. We don't say, cough, oh, I'm meditating now, he should not cough, No, that is already getting involved with cough. So cough. Or movement. Someone moves a little bit. Someone comes into the room. So we notice that, no problem. Problem is to get involved, because then we fixate on it. Now, so the five senses, they keep awake and open because of clarity. And clarity cannot be undermined in any way. If we close the eyes, we're cutting one door to wisdom, actually. So therefore, from the very beginning, all senses are open, and we have to bring our minds to attention on the present moment. Now, when a thought arises, then what do we do with a thought? Because the thought will arise. I can guarantee you a thought will arise when we're meditating. So, are we going to judge the thought? Is the intention of that practice, of this practice, to cultivate good thoughts? If there's a compassionate thought, I will dwell in the thought. If it is a thought of anger because someone hurt me, I will just reject that thought and I will start to just dwell also on that. No, we do not qualify any thought. There is a very strong reason for that. We train ourselves to see thoughts in a neutral way. They're just thoughts. It doesn't matter if it's a fantastic thought full of piousness and compassion and whatever, or a most horrible thought. It doesn't really matter. We have to train ourselves to take away that color that the thoughts have, because that is what magnetizes our attention. The thought is just movement in the mind. It should not have absolutely any power over us. It's totally intangible. You cannot even, it's elusive, it's moving, so we have to train ourselves to see thoughts as like that. And that's the way that slowly, bringing back the mind to the present moment, again and again, we disengage from the thought. Because we are not even judging it. I don't care what you are. You might be fantastic, but right now, I'm going to stay in the breath, because the breath is representing the present moment. Again, another thought, you come back. Another thought, you come back. It's important not to judge thoughts, because then that's the key. Then you start to see thoughts as what they are. We don't have to be dominated by thoughts. When we have calmed our mind in such a way that a thought doesn't dominate us, but that we kind of can use thought, because thought is very useful. We can produce ideas. We can produce projects with thoughts. Then we will use thoughts, but the thought will lack that kind of quality that will trap our attention and drive us in this incessant train of distraction. So let's practice now a little bit. We'll do a practice with taking the breath as a support, and then we will release the support. So there's two types of meditation: meditation with support and just without any support. That means to say that at the very beginning, to say, rest the mind in nounness. Nounness is very abstract. So we associate it with the breath. Every instant of the breath coming in is one moment of the now, and the same happened with the breath coming out. Inhalating, how all the belly fills up, and then how the lower belly, starts to bring up the breath and goes up, and our attention is totally into that. Presence of mind is most important. That's what's called mindfulness. You're mindful of the going out, mindful of coming in. And then there's also a quality of knowing that it's more light and more all-embracing, that the thing of this attention that comes and goes. and which is what provides much more amplitude to the whole thing. It is that aspect that will know when the body is kind of becoming slumped, or leaning to one side or the other, or because you have some kind of dullness or some kind of distraction and so forth. So that knowing will correct anything that needs to be corrected. So these two aspects have to be present. And then at some point, once we release the breath as a support, still we can continue to remain in the present moment. Because there are moments in which there is absolutely no thought, that is stillness, and then there is movement of thought, and that is what's called movement. And then there is always the most important aspect, is the aspect of awareness, the cognizance that knows when there is no thought and that knows when there is movement. So there, at that point, unlike the first part in which when you have a thought you have to come back to the breath, if you have a thought in the second type of meditation without support, thoughts are not something that you have to avoid. You're not bringing to any other state. A thought is happening in the present moment. So, since you have the cognizance of the present moment, now there is thought, I knew it. And now there is no thought, I know it. It's not that I have to come back to non-thought. I have to come back to stillness. It's not like that. The moment you recognize there is a thought, the thought will disappear, so you come back to stillness. So that is more or less what we're going to do. And then we will do a little bit of practice of love, loving kindness, and compassion. So we'll do now about 20 minutes, half an hour of practice. The position, the posture of the body is very important. You're all sitting in chairs, so the most important part is the back. The back should be totally straight. The hands can be on the knees. And the shoulders should open the chest, like spread apart a little bit, not much. The chin falls a little bit down. Lips and teeth have a space in between. And the eyes are open. That is characteristic of Buddhist meditation. But in order to reduce the visual distraction, then we allow the vision to fall at about 1 meter from our body. We can close our eyes, blink, no problem. And if you find it very difficult to meditate with eyes open because you're used to meditating with eyes closed, it's okay, meditate without closed. But eventually start to open a little bit, like a slit, slowly, because actually meditation has to be very relaxed, kind of the more relaxed thing we do. I mean, we are normal, we are natural, so therefore also being with the eyes closed is not something, a natural thing, right? So therefore, the best thing is to try to meditate with eyes open. Okay, so let's do some meditation. attention should not be too tight, but also not too loose. If it's too tight, then there will be a proliferation of thoughts. Too loose, you might lose clarity and eventually induce sleep. So just follow inhalation, how it comes in, and how it goes into the body, how the belly fills up, and then how it comes out. And continuously, attention should go along with the inhalation and exhalation of the breath. If a thought comes, no problem, because we can always go back to breath, but we have to have that determination, not to settle in that thought, to disengage from that thought and come back to the breath, just in and out movement of the breath. Clarity should always be present. Clarity means that you know what's happening. This includes what happens with the five senses. If you find it easier, you can count the breaths, count up to 7 cycles of inhalation and exhalation. That would count as 1, and 2, and so forth up to 7. And then you break. Breaking the meditation doesn't mean you start to think of all kinds of things. It means that you keep a more panoramic kind of awareness, but you're not focused on the breath. You can move your body during these 20 seconds of rest and then again resume with 7 breaths. Now close your eyes and bring to mind the person you love most. Can be a person, can be son, daughter, wife, husband, father, mother, whoever you love most. And start to feel love for that person that you're now imagining in your mind. Imagine that that person is happy, that they're finding whatever they want that makes them happy. So you feel love. You feel happy that they are happy because you love that person. You would do anything for that person to be happy. Feel that. Now think of someone else who is kind of neutral. You don't have much relation. Maybe a cashier in the supermarket, or someone who's walking the street, a guy who's selling coffee at Starbucks. People that have no history with you. And try to feel that same quality of love that we were feeling for the other person. See if you can extend it to them. They also want to be happy. They have the right to be happy. Just like ourselves, we also have the right to be happy. And we also feel responsible, somehow, to bring that happiness to them, if possible. Now think of somebody who has hurt you, who you want to avoid meeting because you have some ugly memories or stories with that person. Maybe they have cheated, or maybe they've done something quite bad, or maybe you feel they're unpleasant. You don't want to see them because somehow you want to avoid them. But now they come into the picture. They also have the right to be happy. if they really hurt you, it's because they are also dominated by their own afflictions. They are not Buddhas. They are not free beings. They are conditioned. So somehow, although they think they're doing everything with absolute deliberation and so forth, maybe they're doing, but that whole thing is because of their confusion. So they can become someone in which, because of that, they are suffering from that. Now they want to be happy. Why not? Let's try to feel love towards these people also. Let's see if we can also extend the same quality of love to that person. Now let's go back to the person you love most and imagine that they are really suffering because of one reason or another. Maybe they are very ill. They cannot get over the sickness and they are worried, afraid that they might die. Maybe they just they broke with their partner. They have so many memories of the relationship and how it went foul. Maybe they lost a job and have the fear how to pay mortgage and so forth. There are many causes of suffering, anxiety, fear, and feel for their suffering. That is, that empathy means that we're feeling what they are suffering then impacts us. That is, then evokes in us the feeling of compassion. How I would like to be able to relieve that person I love so much of the suffering that affects it. Now we go to that person who is neutral and we feel the same. Because also everybody suffers, so somehow we can't ignore it just because they're neutral. Everything we have that contributes to our well-being comes from other beings, directly or indirectly. It doesn't matter if they are paid for it, but the food we get, the clothes we wear, the mobility we have, everything that we use, the being, our life, would be impossible if we didn't receive that contribution from all other people. And we don't know them all. So there are so many neutral people who are actually contributors to my well-being, my happiness. We can't ignore them. They also want to avoid suffering. They don't know exactly how to do, but we try to help them because we feel responsible relieving them also from their suffering. Now let's think about the unpleasant person, the enemy or whatever. And this might not be so easy, but the fact that it's not so easy to feel compassion for that person, showing us how wrongly we are perceiving the people that surround us and beings that surround us. That person definitely is dominated by their affliction, so he can become an object of our compassion. If we were totally free, and from that total freedom he decided to hurt us, then that would be a different thing. But that person is not free also. We usually get fixated on the face value of his action or her action. And we don't see beyond that. That person most probably will also feel bad about what they are doing. Or not. It doesn't matter. But they are also creating bad karma for themselves. So they are also objects of our compassion. They are driven by their afflictions. Now open a little bit the eyes. Stop thinking about these people or these beings and just watch your mind without supporting it on the breath. Maybe the mind has no thought, it's totally still. We have to notice that. And when there is a thought, we also have to notice the thought. There can't be any more occurrences in the mind. There's either stillness or movement. So whatever is happening to the mind, then we have to be aware of what's happening. As it is, just as it presents itself. We don't try to change it. We don't try to modify, but also we are not distracted. Seeing directly the mind and whatever, in whichever way it at that moment manifests. But we have to be aware of it. Notice the mind. If you find it difficult, you can come back to the breath. If your mind is with many thoughts, or you can't manage this, then you come back to the breath. It's no problem. They are just techniques. Don't modify what is there. Just let it be. But also don't be distracted. That's where we will find Buddha. As he said, there is no Buddha elsewhere. Look at your own mind. That is our basic essence. The natural state of our being is found right there. If we just let it be, not modifying, not being distracted, just letting it be, then it will become by itself its natural state. Are there any questions? Yes. Can we have light, please? And, there's one question here, the microphone. Here, Christian. There's one here. Front row.
Thank you, Gerardo, for these sessions. I don't know if it's a question as much as an observation, but maybe you can give us a little guidance on. You earlier touched on the absolute, and there's not really a self, and there's not really a festival of faith, and on. And I always find that I start going to nihilistic tendencies when considering that. And I know Soknyi Rinpoche will say absolute understanding with relative respect. Is that what he says? So I try to remind myself of that phrase to not get caught up in that feeling. I don't know if you have any other advice along those lines.
Yeah, there is a tendency because so much stress in emptiness. No? Emptiness, anybody that reads or comes in contact with Buddhism, then of course will come in contact with shunyata, or that word emptiness. And emptiness has to be understood clearly. Otherwise then we have that problem. Emptiness is not like this empty room when everybody left, but it's that nothing in existence has a true or independent or intrinsic nature. There's no intrinsic entity in anything in existence, even in oneself. So that absence of intrinsic identity is because it is absent, that it is empty of inherent or independent existence, intrinsic identity. There's nothing that is singular, real, and independent, and so forth. So, therefore, you can speak about something that is empty of that type of existence. But because things do not have that type of existence, then everything can happen. Imagine if things were permanent, if they were real. This couldn't exist, no? So emptiness actually is not nothingness. It is like the womb or the space that allows everything to happen. Existence can happen because nothing has independent and true existence. If things were real, according to the definition, if things were independent, and if things really had an intrinsic nature, they couldn't change. Imagine a world that couldn't change. Your existence right now, this couldn't happen. But this happens. It happens and it has some kind of reality. It is a conventional or relative reality, and it is a conventional truth also. That's why Buddha said it's true. It's true because all of us take this as true. So we cannot say it's a lie. I mean, conventionally everybody agrees that things are true, or at this level. But from the absolute level, nothing of this is true in the sense of how truth or reality was defined. And these things do not collide, you know, they're not really a contradiction. That is the middle way. So therefore, if things lack independent existence, or they lack this intrinsic identity, well, that's fine. That is the absolute nature. So therefore, things are not real. You do not fall into seeing everything as concrete, as solid, existing, materialistic, and so forth. We eliminate this position of falling into the extreme view of eternalism, you know, that things have an eternal existence and so forth, that there is a continuum, you know, unchanging thread from now until eternity that never changes, and that it's had its own existence. That you don't fall on that because you've discovered that things do not have true existence. Eliminate the extreme of eternalism. But then also it doesn't mean that things are nothing, because actually because everything is emptiness or everything is empty, then everything can happen. So therefore it is not nihilism, because this whole world, this whole manifestation can happen because things are empty of existence, true existence, right? So therefore neither existent nor inexistent. And the middle way says, so you walk in the middle way of neither existence and or inexistence. But then they say, but the wise do not settle even in the middle. So therefore, you know, it's kind of, this philosophy is like you don't assert anything, but you can reduce any kind of possibility into an absurd. You can refute everything. Yeah? So actually, if you think it that way, it's difficult to fall into nihilism because you're not negating anything. You're not negating this kind of existence. It happens. I mean, and actually, if you think about it, it could not possibly happen unless things were devoid of true existence, right? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciated these meetings in the morning. Your introduction of the reification was very helpful. Mm-hmm. I wanted to comment on that. And was hoping you could say something about karma. You know, what that entails, what that
Karma is literally, karma means action, but there is no action without effect, right? So every action we do has a result. And in ordinary way, when we talk, because the action finishes the moment we do it, and what remains is the footprint of that action, so to speak. It's like an imprint that stays in our consciousness, and of course the material effects of our action. But we kill a bug, then the bug died because we killed. But in our consciousness, then there is an effect of what's called karma. The action that left an effect, the effect, what really counts as karma is within our consciousness. The effect and the result of karma is what is stored in our consciousness as an imprint, as a habit. Imprint means habit. It is an imprint, and that became habitual. That became a propensity. It will yield the fruit after some time. So therefore, there are three types of actions that we can do. We can do mental actions, verbal actions, physical actions. And when we talk about karma, in general, like in the West, when we talk about karma, we always think more about the result, right? Oh, he has good karma, and also usually it's like related to bad karma, right? Has bad karma, he's sick and everything happens. But there can also be very good karma. So it's good karma, bad karma, any karma is a result. Karma in itself also does not have any kind of identity, true existence. I mean, we reify karma. It is reified within the structure of our cognizance, present cognizance. So that's why it acts. But the moment you realize the nature of reality as the absence of total reification, karma also becomes like an illusory stuff. That's why we can be free of karma. And that means to say that karma in itself conditions a lot of our being, even though our situation is a manifestation of also different aspects of karma, and also, of course, our life is because of karma. Then we are human beings because of a karma that we did before that gave us this kind of body. And then we perceive as human beings because our perception is a karmic perception. As I said before, a bug will perceive as a bug because he has the karmic perception of a bug. And all this is quite conditioned, but still there is, how would you say, this freedom. We can, following instructions in the practice, letting the mind be as it is, and so forth, then we have the capacity of not being, we are not 100% governed and totally deterministic way by karma. So karma is something that can be eliminated, and then it can also be replaced. When one is still abiding in the conceptual level, anything we do generates karma. Anything that is done by a cognizance that is still functioning in the duality of subject and object generates karma. So there can be good karma and there can be bad karma. So while we are within the conceptual level, then let's generate good karma, because that also wipes out bad karma. But still, we're replacing one karma for the other, one imprint, one kind of habits, bad habits, by good habits. Still doesn't mean that we will be freed. Like the general analogy is like black clouds, they cover the sun, but white clouds also cover the sun. So we're still not seeing the sun, right? So if we devote all our lives to doing good and being compassionate and everything, that's fantastic. That's the best way that we can use our life. It does not mean that that will lead us to liberation, because we're still tied to karma. In this case, would be good karma, but still tied to karma. What will eliminate the bondage is destroying reification. And of all the techniques taught in Buddhism, the only thing that can destroy reification is the realization of emptiness. Realization of the emptiness of mind, or realization of emptiness. That means to say that you see that reification was falsehood, that it had absolutely it had absolutely no grounds to be sustained. That reification itself is the mistake. When you see that, then you destroy the reifying fixation, then your mind becomes free, then the karmic wheel, it doesn't mean that at that moment you became enlightened, but then you have a basis from which to operate, which is not ruled by karma, because then you're operating from the nature of your being, the nature of your mind. That doesn't mean that habits from old karma will cease, because we have so much still stored in our consciousness. So they will continue to arise. But if you don't leave the continuity of the nature of mind, you don't fixate and you don't reify the thought that comes of anger or the thought that comes, of jealousy. You don't reify it. If you don't fixate on it, it doesn't become concrete. Therefore, as soon as it arises, it is liberated by itself, and you don't generate further karma. So slowly, all the bad karma, all karma, good, bad, whatever, karmic imprints, they start to be depleted. And when you have completely depleted that store of karma, then you become a Buddha at that point. There's nothing that can induce you to the error again, because there's nothing there that can condition you to mistake reality. You're a complete, totally stabilized being that cannot come back. There's nothing to come back. That is what is called a totally enlightened being. That's what we can reach. I mean, we all have that capacity. Buddha was a human being, yeah, at some point. Okay, maybe if there are no questions, we can... Oh yeah, one question there.
First of all, I want to thank you and ask you to come back. We want you here. Could you talk about the sense of continuity of rebirth? I know there are various thoughts on that. Can you talk about the Tibetan view or other views of rebirth?
No, the Buddhist view actually is not really Tibetan. It's like Tibetan Buddhism also is from India, right? So it doesn't differ in that sense from the Buddhist view. Tibetan Buddhism and the Buddhist view is the same, especially in this case. Because, of course, the question says, if there is no self, then what is it that continues from life to life? What continues is that mere self. Because that consciousness, I mean, we have... when the body dies, the body is physical, it's made of the 5 elements, right? Like earth, water, fire, and space, and so forth. And then that dies. But the mind or consciousness is immaterial. So therefore, it continues. The body also transforms into something else. It's not that completely annihilates, because it transformed. And the consciousness continues also. And consciousness is in one instant of consciousness after the other. But this consciousness, which has not been enlightened by wisdom, therefore has destroyed that reified I notion, then continues to have that virus of reification within it, in an unconscious way, however you want to call it. So that consciousness that leaves the body is what will take rebirth in the future life. Conditioned by karma, because that consciousness carries all the karma that we have from this life and also from all the past. And also the karma will model that consciousness and will drive it to take rebirth according to karmic connections or whatever in any of the 6 states of existence. Now, if we realize emptiness, we realize non-ego or non-self, true non-self, kind of like the absence, that self is a mistake, then we cut that change. And then there is no longer a compulsive rebirth, because that is driven by karma. But of course, when that happens, then you have this upsurge of compassion and wisdom at the same time, and therefore you can choose your own rebirth consciously. Consciously you can choose your own rebirth with the purpose of continuing your altruistic work for other beings. That's what the bodhisattva activity is. No? So it's important that what follows is a consciousness that is distorted because of that misconception of the I. It's not evident at that point, but the moment it encounters something, it will immediately react as the notion of an I. So that is what follows. But there is nothing solid, or it is also impermanent, it changes instant to instant, therefore it cannot be said to be an intrinsic thing. It's like a rosary of beads, each bead being one instant of consciousness, right? So in Buddhism we say there is a rosary of beads. Each instant of consciousness is based on something which is similar in kind, which is the instant preceding it. And therefore carries also the qualities of the other one. And then this other one carries the other one, and so forth. So it forms like a chain of beads, beads being instant of consciousness. But there is no thread that binds them. In other systems, I think they speak that there is a thread that binds the different types of experiences, which might be, I don't know, Atman or whatever. But in Buddhism, there is a continuity of consciousness, but there is no thread that binds all these. That thread would be an intrinsic kind of entity, right? So that would be the way rebirth is explained. No? So, in the end, if you're supposed to be, if we're supposed to be like a human being, then that consciousness at the very last of the period, it's called the pardo, like the intermediate period, that being, if it's supposed to be a man, then will have attraction to the mother and aversion to the father, and then that very moment goes into the womb and is the third component, together with the sperm and the ovum, that will conceive the child. We need the two physical elements of sperm and ovum, I think it's called, and then finally consciousness comes, and then from then on the baby starts to grow, and and finally is born as a human. In this case, as a male. Yeah. So all that happens because karma is inducing, one thing or the other. We don't have much control on that. We have no control on that. But others do. I mean, people who have already freed themselves from ignorance, then they have control. They continue on altruistic basis to guide this. We have so many cases of lamas who leave letters, indicating where they should be found and so forth, because they can see and will guide the consciousness to that place. Yeah? So Ausli is asking me for a brief explanation of merit and dedication, and maybe we can finish with that. In the Buddhist tradition, intention or motivation is extremely important, and also at the end, it is important to close anything we do with dedication. We generate, whenever we are doing anything positive, then good karma, but in the context of spirituality and the spiritual tradition of Buddhism, then is called merit. I don't know if it's a good word or not, but it's the standard jargon, merit. And merit means something that we have generated that will contribute to our spiritual growth, and as opposed to something negative that will hamper our spiritual growth. But then, that is individual. Each of us, we did it. So karma is individual because it is an individual action. It will maybe affect on other beings, but the result of that karma, apart from whatever happens to the other person and what remains in the consciousness, is individual. So we had done something very good. We meditated, we heard words of like that represent the teachings on truth and the path and whatever. This is good. It's much better than watching TV or doing something wrong. So this something good, it is ours. And if we leave it, it might give a good result for us. But because we have the intention of finding freedom, because we want to free other beings, so that when we want to be Buddhas, because that's the way that we want to help other beings, then in Buddhism, if we have that attitude, then we can't keep that for ourselves. We cannot keep that which we produced just as an own personal benefit. So, in consonance with the motivation that guided the practice, which is altruistic, now mentally we share it with all other beings. I work for you. I give everything that I've done. Mentally, you share it with everyone, and you dedicate it. You say that as soon as you receive this merit, may you, and you can dedicate anything, may the world, come at peace, may all beings recognize their Buddha nature, may, global warming be reduced and a cure be found, anything. Merit can be used for that. Now, of course, one can say, how can it be? Will it help or not? Well, when we talk about spirituality, spirituality has to do with many invisible things. And after all these divisions that we make between one and the other, and matter and mind and so forth, they are kind of arbitrary divisions that are made because of our ignorance. In fact, in essence, there is no such absolute division. So everything has the quality of cognizance according to Buddhism. So if we send these mind waves of cognizance, then it will influence everything, because essentially everything is made up, constructed by cognizance. Maybe difficult to understand, but anyhow. So let's do a little bit this, just a few minutes, instead of doing just an empty silence. Let's think about the merit we created, think about all beings, starting with the people we love, and including all other beings, and distributing the merit and dedicating it for whatever we want them to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerardo. And just to echo what was said, we really do hope that you'll come back soon, and always feel that you have a home, a very welcoming and open home here in Louisville. And I know you all would join me with a little applause. I think that's totally appropriate for your excellent teachings. And we wish you a very safe trip home. I know it's a long trip, so we'll have you in our thoughts and prayers. Also, everybody knows, I think, but at 12:30, our biggest session of the entire festival will begin right here in the Pamela Brown Theater, the Awaken the Dreamer Symposium. You can read your program to see the details, but it should be a totally marvelous program about how to take the spirit of this festival and bring it more actively into the world. And again, that's at 12:30. And then this evening starting at, and that will go until 5 p.m. And then this evening starting at 7 p.m., we have a full program from 7 to 9 with Ed Bastian and Jonathan Bastian. And they will be joined later by Kabir Haminsky and Camille Haminsky. So be sure to tell your friends. And also, since this is the last day of the festival, make sure that you know that our catalogs are available for you, and all the other material in the lobby that we've published on our site are available for you to have and to take home, and also to share with your friends who couldn't maybe be here. And of course, as has been said many times, you know that the all the festival programs, including these meditation sessions, all will exist on our YouTube channel via our website. So you can feel free to share those or go back and visit them as often as you would like. Many thanks.